I am super excited to be here. My name's Jackie Hyland, director on our global team at Silicon Valley Bank. And the fun thing about today has been that in every panel, I think I've heard something about global. And in every panel, I've sort of heard something about Silicon Valley is great, but what's happening is outside. So I'm super excited for our panelists to be here to also talk a little bit more about that. Going to pass over the mic. Would love just quick intros, who you guys are, your firms, and we'll get started there.
Here we go. My name is Jeff Harbach. I'm the CEO of Kauffman Fellows. Kauffman Fellows is a leadership platform for global innovation leaders and venture investors. We're about 525 fellows across 42 different countries, based here in the Valley.
Hope I'm on. Yes. Chris Rogers, partner at Lumia Capital. We're a SF-based growth stage fund investing here in the U.S., but also Southeast Asia, LATAM, Middle East, and other parts of the world.
And I'm Antoine, Colaco, partner at Valor Capital Group. We are a Brazil-focused fund where we have the majority of our investments are in Brazil early stage. We also do some cross-border investing to help companies enter the Brazilian market.
Great. And just a quick side note, I will be doing Slido at the end, so if you have questions, be thinking about them. So I want to kick this off with Chris and Antoine, because you guys are both based here in the Bay. All three of you are based here in the Bay, but you guys have your funds set up and invest globally. Can you talk about why you decided to do that and some of the advantages of being here, maybe having teams across the board? And yeah, just sort of your thinking about that.
Well, I think it's inescapable that some of the best investing talent in the world is here, and some of the best companies in the world are here, and combined, given their density in a small city, this ecosystem is second to none. So if you can gather talent here, that's a plus. We, particularly at the growth stage, have found very little trouble either getting deal flow from some of the local VCs in the markets where we invest, because they're happy to have access to additional capital. They're happy to see us and our benchmarking across multiple jurisdictions. They're happy to have Silicon Valley expertise, and my own background is in wireless, which is a powerful platform for technology growth. And so typically at the growth stage, the best entrepreneurs, they can't help it. They want to come here. They want to attract capital from here, and they want to attract talent. They come. They know the handful of firms that realistically will consider writing a check to them. And so they find us. It is not that we're not out in the market. We're out in the market a lot, but it isn't hard to attract them here once the word is out that you put money into their markets.
For us, it was several factors. One, first of all, we were founded by the former U.S. ambassador to Brazil. All of us have done work in Brazil. And so it was a natural network of contacts that we had in the market. When we started the ecosystem, which is in Brazil, is probably less than 10 years old, really. And it was still growing. And so there was a lot of opportunities, and especially for early stage. That provides us a lot of opportunities to invest. There are very few VCs who are doing early stage like we are in a market that's one of the top 10 markets in the world by GDP. And you have huge markets. I mean, some things that people don't know about Brazil, and some of our investments have been, Brazil has the second largest gym market in the world after the US. They are 60% of the trucking market of the US. They're the third largest beauty market in the world. So these are huge markets whereby technology has really had very little penetration. So we saw a lot of opportunity to do early stage investing in these markets where valuations have not been driven up by huge amounts of capital just being pumped in. So it's a little bit of the Wild West, but also had huge opportunities for us.
Really, really super exciting. And Jeff, I just wanted to kind of touch on your experience. Kauffman obviously is bringing together some of the new emerging managers that are not necessarily based here. What are some of the trends that you're seeing in terms of geography, and how are these emerging managers? Are they coming to the U.S.? Are they able to kind of capture LP money here? What is that looking like?
Well, so first I'd say what you've heard as a trend in this conference is that certainly investing is global. We've seen since 2000. In 2000, there's about 80% of VC capital was going into North America. About 5 years ago, 2012, was about 60 to 70%. This year, we think it's actually going to be more than half of VC capital is actually going into places outside of North America. So that's a big shift. We think that's an underlying big shift that we need to be paying attention to. If investors aren't looking at where more than half of VC dollars are going, they could be missing out. We also think that, and we can come back to your question, we also think that the world, we hear oftentimes the world is flat. I mean, heck, I've said the world is flat. What we mean by the world is flat is the world is very connected. But actually, we believe differently. We believe the world is spiky. We see that 50% of people live in urban population density centers. 75% of the world's population live in these destination centers in industrialized countries. What that means is that people do this not just because of the great restaurants and wanting to bump into people and bad traffic. They do it because of idea sharing. They do it because of innovation happens in these density centers. And so the world being spiky allows for technologies to be built anywhere. We know there's talent everywhere. Now technologies have been built anywhere for a long time, but now we get to see great companies being built anywhere across the globe. And you look, I mean, I see Danny from Beko Capital. That's, Kareem is a great company in his region of the world, or Mercado Libre in South America, or I mean, on and on and on. We're seeing great companies being built outside the U.S. So that's the trends that we're seeing. We think that that innovation technology is very much global, and we're extremely excited about supporting that growth through the Kauffman Fellows program.
Yeah, and I think going to that point, when we think about, right, companies want to come here, they want to raise money in Silicon Valley, but more and more we're also seeing them go to other growth markets where there's a lot of capital. And I know in Brazil has been a really particularly interesting case, and Antoine and Chris would love if you could share a little bit more about what you're seeing in terms of growth market to growth market, right? Not necessarily depending less on coming here, maybe going to Israel, maybe going to China, maybe going to Singapore. What are some of those things that you're seeing where entrepreneurs say, you know what, I actually may not even need Silicon Valley?
I think the availability of edibles still gives us an edge here. So we're seeing pretty many of them come here, but perhaps they are going to the others. I don't think, when I think of the profile, without stereotyping, the profile of the best growth stage entrepreneurs, so let's assume those are people who have gotten their company to a 10 million ARR in their local market or some combination of their markets. They are invariably citizens of the world. They have not spent their whole lives in whatever country they're in. They spent their summer with the cousin in Ottawa, or they went to the London School of Economics, or they did a year abroad in Brazil. They are invariably that. So they're comfortable in all of these markets, and that is going to happen. It just happens that here we have such a concentration that it is easy to meet so many people. And we have such an open ecosystem that we don't put up our defenses. We put up the welcome mat. And that just makes it an easier place to try to raise money.
Yeah, I do think that we are seeing some trends, though, from other areas. China, for example, has been aggressive in Brazil. We've seen the Alibabas, the Tencents, Baidus of the world looking at the market. I think they've been very proactive in these things. I think you've seen what's happened in Africa from the commodity side. They're looking at Brazil, a large market where there's still a good opportunity to make good returns, and very strategic. If you think of an Alibaba platform, which is not only commerce, but it's payments, it's all logistics, et cetera, where they have an opportunity to enter early. I do think one of the things that sometimes happens with Silicon Valley is people in Silicon Valley wait for things to come to them, whereas I think in some of these markets you need to go out there. And I think not everything will come here over time. I think that there will be some progression where people are saying, look, we have to be going to the markets. You can't just sit back and this is always going to happen for you. So I do think that there is some of that in other markets where they're seeing these opportunities, they're seeing other markets that are big, that are opportunistic, that they can go and be aggressive in. So I think we're seeing some of that in Brazil right now.
+1.
And given that we're kind of in a room with investors and maybe have already invested globally or interested in it, would love to hear all three of your ideas on when you kind of pitched your LPs and were saying you're going to be doing global investing, kind of what really stuck out to their mind, or what kind of things were successful in getting those LPs to be involved in your fund and were exciting. And I know, in Jeff, obviously across your funds as well, what maybe some trends that have been helpful for them?
Well, in our case, because we do U.S. also, we do more than half U.S., I think sometimes it's a dip the toe in and get a sense of what happens when you invest in emerging markets without the high volatility. The second is without the high volatility of a single market. So I think we sit in a different position that's very synergistic with, say, Danny or the folks at Valor. I mean, we are across more markets. That means we rely on other VCs for their local expertise a lot, and it isn't that we're not in the market. We go to those markets, but they like our ability to say, sell any car. Well, you probably saw Instacar. You probably saw CarSum. So we can give you metrics that tell you whether this is going to be a global player or somebody who knows how to do their business, and they don't have as much access to that. So our role is a different role than that role, and it works really, I mean, I would say pretty well together.
So, you know, what's interesting about this, I think, is that VC is very much a local game. We're here talking about global investing, but it's very much a local game, especially from an LP perspective. The way describing this, what I mean by this is that taking the perspective of a international GP, raising a fund in a market, they go to their LPs. First of all, they go to their local LPs, which every region of the market has wealthy individuals and institutions where they can go, they can raise capital. What do they have to sell? Well, first they have to sell why VC. You know, why would I invest in VC? I'm investing in real estate. I'm investing in all these other things. Why do I need to invest in VC? Then they need to sell why now. You know, why technology? What's so special now? Then they need to see why here. What's the region? You know, why would I invest in this region? Why not just go to the Valley? Or, you know, the investors from all over the world are thinking, if I'm going to invest in VC, I just need to go to California. And then if they can get through all three of those points, then it's why us? Why the team? So these international GPs have, when they go to their local LPs, these are the four things they have to sell. Whereas when they go to US LPs, and frankly even US GPs, all they're really selling is why us. They're not selling on anything else. So that's the road that international GPs have to deal with. And so we spend a lot of our time trying to help them unlock the capital that is in that region to support those entrepreneurs, because, boy, the Kazakh stories of the world, where you have two entrepreneurs that build Mercado Libre and then take that capital and invest it back into their own ecosystem in Argentina and Brazil, that is, or Danny Farha, when he's a successful entrepreneur, then launches Beko Capital. I mean, these are the great stories that need to be celebrated, but that is the localization of VC that needs to be unlocked if we truly are going to talk about global VC and global investing.
Yeah, I can't agree more. I mean, we've heard every question in the book with Brazil going through its ups and downs. You know, early on was why Brazil? Is it too early? Are there exits? You know, from the local LPs, it was, you know, I can get 16% returns on my money locally, risk-free, because inflation was so high in Brazil. Why should I put into VC? What is this asset class? We don't understand it. How do we even invest in VC? So we've heard all of these sort of, and for our especially when you're doing a first fund, it's not easy. You don't have a track record off of which you can raise the money. A lot of questions around the asset class, who you are, why this country, why now? And then last year was awful for us in some ways as far as trying to fundraise to explain to foreign LPs, because Brazil looked like it was crashing. The economy was going down. There was the president was impeached. It's not the best kind of way to try to raise money. But again, you know, what the nice thing is that we've seen, and I think something that needs to be understood is also, there is oftentimes a split between the macroeconomic situation and the micro situation of technology. In a country like Brazil, where technology has not had a huge footprint, there's huge opportunities. And even in a downturn, that's an opportunity to apply technology to save money for businesses. So B2B SaaS companies are actually doing well right now because there's huge opportunities. And so once you get people past that first layer of questioning, and you can actually get them to look at performance, look at companies, look at entrepreneurs and the actual what's happening in the market, that's when things change.
Can I add one additional point? From the perspective of oldest guy in the room, there is also, exactly, ouch, ouch. It is going to change generationally. And when I see people in any market where we invest, coming to us and thinking about venture, the young people understand incredible wealth has been generated, and it is sexier than another mall or a rice plant or whatever the heck, right? And so you may see the investment committee generation sitting back, worried about losing things, looking at the risk more predominantly, but they're not going to be around that much longer. Sadly, I mean, you know, speaking as one of them, but and so that is going to unleash a lot more of that local capital in things that once they start making money, I mean, once they unleash it, they're going to make money in it, and then they're going to continue to do it. So I'm not at all worried about the long-term prospects for that.
I agree.
And that's going to have probably the biggest benefits for the locally focused funds that right now have this almost sickening disadvantage when you go into their markets and you watch their local wealth sort of discriminate against their local investing talent.
To that point, I just say that you're already seeing the first step of that, which is also first getting the young people to see entrepreneurship as a career path. And so in Brazil, we're just seeing that now, because in the past it was a civil service job was what you wanted, because you'd have employment for life and you'd have a pension for life and you'd be great. The other thing was you could go into finance or banking. Now we're seeing a pivot where people are now seeing the opportunity in entrepreneurship, which I think is the first step. And then, as you said, the families where the generation changing, they're seeing their friends going into entrepreneurship, they see them being successful, and then they see the opportunity to invest. So I completely agree with that.
Definitely, and I would love to kind of go, when you think about co-investing or investing locally, and Jeff would love to hear maybe how have your funds even worked together on deals? Is it, how has that been synergistic? And also, Antoine and Chris, when you invest with U.S. investors or local investors, what are some kind of dynamics within global investing that you think are unique or advantageous for a tech company?
So one of the biggest misconceptions I hear in early stage investing is that every investor thinks that every A round is completely oversubscribed. Every seed round is completely oversubscribed, when the reality is there is room in just about every deal. Not every deal, but just about every deal. So there's a lot of room to have kind of soft elbows and come in and be collaborative. And that's what we see certainly within the Kauffman Fellows Network, but also globally as we go around to these ecosystems. The ones that are being successful are the ones that are making friends in the ecosystem and then making sure that they're branching out to other ecosystems. Because again, we say, it's great to be in one of these spiky regions of the world, the way that I describe the world being spiky, but those spikes have to be connected to the other spikes around the world. You have to be understanding what's going on. I mean, if you're an entrepreneur right now or an investor, you need to know what is going on in China, what is going on in Singapore, what is going on in Dubai, what is going on in Israel. I mean, you just have to know what's going on in these areas. So being connected to other investors and sharing deal flow and sharing ideas is vitally, vitally important.
I think the currency in Silicon Valley has shifted long ago to value add. It isn't the capital you bring. And that's beginning to show itself in the emerging market investment groups when we used to see. The other thing that is changing, and so that means that they're looking for people that bring different value. They're not looking for their mirror image, they're looking for things. So that might mean they come to us, or they come, they're looking for things that the company needs. The other thing that I'm seeing increasingly improve is a collaborative spirit. Honestly, not that many years ago, you could go into a market, I won't name names, and they'd say, Chris, we want you to meet the top 5 VCs, and the top 5 VCs would show up and look at each other with daggers. They really did not like each other. It was like, if you take money from that person, you're dead to me for life. And that rolled right off my lips. I kind of like saying it, but it's not the way business is done here. We might compete heavily for a deal, and then collaborate the next week on the next deal. And that collaboration is part of the strength. It's what's helped build these major ecosystems. And now that they're moving into that, I think it really is going to help their own ecosystems.
Yeah, I think we've seen that a lot. In Brazil, it was a very collaborative sort of environment. I think the biggest areas where you saw some elbowing was really in funds where, if you have a minimum ownership stake in a company, sometimes the size of the round is not big enough for everybody to get what stake they want, and that's where it happens. But I think one of the things where we believe we bring value is this cross-border, and I think cross-border aspect is, as Chris said, a number of different things. It's intellectual capital coming in. So one of the companies where we're both investors, we brought the technical co-founder of Uber into one of our logistic plays, which for a company coming out of Brazil, that's huge, right? That value of that person, as well as the COO of Coyote Logistics, that is experience that they would not find on their own and could not get on their own. And I think that's what's really important. And bringing that value earlier and earlier into the evolutionary stage of the company, I think is really important. But I think, to your question around what are these international investors, the value that they bring, I think, as Chris said, is a lot of that expertise, the value add on top of the capital, especially as these companies are going global. connections with companies that are in other markets where they can learn. We've had some of our companies, meet companies in China because they're in the recruiting space and they've got an interesting model in China that they want to see how that can apply to Brazil as well. So I think that's where the value really comes in a lot of ways.
Can I say one more thing really quick? So this idea, I love this idea of collaboration. Your question was around collaboration cross-market, cross-geography. So there's this concept called the trust diversity paradox. I don't know if anybody's heard of this, but essentially, I'll break it down really quick to try to be fast. Trust, we are, as humans, we are built to trust people that look just like us, that think just like us, that when we look across the room, we like to be looking at something close to a mirror because that builds trust. Diversity has been proven to increase value in organizations, proven. And in fact, in homogeneous organizations, it actually, if you are another homogeneous add to that organization, you destroy value. You actually decrease value because you're another yes person to what everybody else is saying. So how do you match this trust diversity paradox and making sure that you maximize value and also maximize trust? And what they found is that one of the best ways to do that is through shared experiences with something on the line, something that matters. Well, that's entrepreneurship. That's entrepreneurship. There's a shared experience with something on the line. And so we see that some of the best cross-geography, diversity type of investing happens when there's shared experiences with investors that are building on this trust piece, but also building on the diversity piece. I think it's something very, very important to be thinking about as you think about cross-border.
Totally. I'm going to ask one last question, and then we will go to audience questions. Putting yourself in the role of entrepreneur, if you could start a company today, where would you start it, and in what industry? A little bit of a sidebar. I didn't tell them I was asking this before.
All right, I'll go. So where would I start it? I'm super bullish on, well, actually, I'm super bullish on a lot of areas of the world. I'll name a couple of them, but then I'll narrow it. So I'm super bullish on China, super bullish on sub-Saharan Africa, super bullish on Singapore, super bullish on Dubai.
So everywhere, you're bullish.
But I think that if I were to build it anywhere, I think I would probably build it somewhere in either Singapore or Dubai because of their access to major population centers, to major talent and technology access. And what would I build it in? Oh, geez. I mean, you could name any one of the catchphrases out there. I'm super bullish on like mobility and AI and robotics and what that means for just transforming the way that we live.
100%.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great list of places, but, and I like them all. And I could be, well, they're fun to work in. Probably not going to Riyadh yet or some of those places because I would have to build it in a city that fits the sort of top 10 where talent, particularly young talent, is willing to live. And so it's got to be one of these cities where they think this is quality of life, this is career building city, network building city. And certainly Singapore, Dubai, all those cities match that. Obviously, hair regrowth is where I'm going to build this business. And I don't know where I'm going to find this information, but it's coming really soon, I hope.
Longevity.
No, really, IoT is my thing, but.
Look, I'd have to say Brazil. I mean, otherwise I'm doing the wrong thing. So I would do it in Brazil, but I think the area I would look at is agriculture technology. I think we're trying to figure out how to feed the world, and I think if you look at Brazil, it's the breadbasket of the world in some ways, and there's very little technology in agriculture. And I think there are huge opportunities to make it much more efficient and effective as we're going to face more and more problems in the future.
Great, guys. Okay, we're going to go to some of the audience questions. So the first one, kind of talking about co-investing with local investors. How do you assess which investors locally that you want to work with or not?
Well, that's a big thing for us, and that is certainly where there's no substitute for spending time in the region. Fortunately, if you're a US VC coming to virtually any of the regions where we invest, there's some hubbub around it. In my lucky case, in all those regions, Nextel, which I was a founder of, did a lot of business. So if I show up in Brazil, Nextel to Brazil is still a big deal. And so it is not hard to connect with them, but you must connect with them. And then you need to do a little diligence around them. And then you have to have a rapport because it is important to be able to communicate effectively from afar. And without rapport, that is just not going to happen.
I mean, we invest, we're a local VC and we invest with all the other local VCs. So it's, we've gotten to know, I mean, in Brazil, there, you know, whereas there are over, I don't know how many, 1,400 VCs in the US or whatever the number is exactly, there's really fewer than 10 in Brazil of our nature. So we know them all. We know what their reputations are. We know which kind of deals they work with on. So, you know, for us, we assess kind of who we work with the best, what kind of needs the company really has, and how we can be complementary with another VC. I think you don't want two VCs that are doing the exact same thing or going to bring the exact same thing to the company.
I forgot one other really important criteria,
Go for
that
it.
they support or have attended the Kauffman program. Right? I mean, that's
Of course.
a given.
Of course. How can, yeah. How can
Right on cue, right on. I would add that critical for us is that the VC sees the entrepreneur as the true hero. That is what we all have. That's what we're all here to do. That's our jobs, is to support the entrepreneurs. And that's not just by throwing a demo day or throwing an event for entrepreneurs. That's being years and years and years on boards, making hard decisions, having difficult conversations, and still supporting them even when when things are going well and when things aren't going so well. We look for the people that are really, truly, through and through there to support the entrepreneur and recognize them as the true heroes in what we're doing.
Really cool. So we were going, whoa, here we go. I guess I was going to double click on the foreign opportunities one. I know that was, we talked about sourcing a bit and how sourcing funds to sourcing companies. How do you guys find these companies? Do they come to you, you go to them? What percentage maybe do you think about outbound versus inbound?
So for us, foreign opportunities is actually outside of Brazil. So a U.S. opportunity is foreign for us, just to change the paradigm a little bit here. So for us, sourcing is actually coming from a lot of our contacts in VCs who actually look to us when their companies have an opportunity for Brazil because they see us as value add. And so for us, we get a lot of inbound from our other VC partners, but we also try to map out some of the biggest sectors in Brazil and see who the big players are, both in Brazil and outside of Brazil, and then we have the ability to be flexible. So for example, in education, we've looked at a couple of companies once. We looked at one in Brazil and one in the US, and we figured, you know, one of them had half the college student body on their platform. The other one was very strong in their platform and revenue generating in the US and a much higher valuation. And we looked at those two and said, where can we make the biggest impact and where do we think we can get the biggest return? And so being able to be flexible on that is something that is interesting to us and important for our model. But foreign is different to us than I think it is for Chris, for example. Yeah,
I mean, I guess if we view foreign as non-U.S., which isn't exactly right, but, if you look at our portfolio, but it's what I said before. We have a lot of inbound from the entrepreneurs. We try to work closely and add value to the other VCs. We try to be collegial and good governance folks. And we show up in the market too. I mean, you know, no substitute for that. We have LPs in every market where we do business. They're sources of deals. And back to the wireless ecosystem, I get calls all the time from the strategy officer or the product director, whatever, from telcos asking us, do you want to meet this company? And really why they're doing it is to vet the company. But nonetheless, it's a great source of deal flow.
Great. I think, do you have time for one more question?
Let's do that. Let's do that Me Too.
The Me Too, yeah. I think the copycat is a big question that I'm sure you guys see a lot. We're the Uber of this or we're the copycat of that, and it's a big market. Will it work? What are you observing more, and how are you guys looking at innovation or looking at when you look at investing?
First, I don't know how Slido works, but I think that our buybacks and efficient strategy in emerging markets, I think that was the first question up. So if you ask that question, it doesn't get answered, come talk to one of us after the panel. We can talk about it. Emerging markets, Me Too models, yes, there are absolutely Me Too. There's Me Too investing going on across the globe. I'm not going to name the areas that happens, but it does. But there are also really great innovative markets that are happening that are changing the way we do ag tech. I mean, I love what's going on in the breadbasket of the world, Brazil, in ag tech. Well, I've already named some of the places that I really like, but in 3D printing, in cryptocurrencies, in blockchain technologies, in autonomous vehicles. I mean, there are places that are taking the technologies that we hear and we read about all the time and saying, we're going to 10x that. We're going to push this into even more innovative business models. So we're really excited about those areas.
Yeah, and that's absolutely the case. Whoever said it early on, there is no reason the next, you pick it, Google, Facebook, Tesla can't come from Cairo or anywhere in the world, because access to technology is there and there's good technical training and there's this desire to be an entrepreneur. But we don't mind Me Too models. We're looking for a return, and generally speaking, there's some great Me Too models with some local differentiation. We mentioned Cream, we're in Cream also. They took cash. It was a huge local differentiator in a population where countries where most people don't have credit cards. Well, they're the market leader. They might be a Me Too, but they're doing their own innovating on a Me Too business plan, and I'm very happy to support that as well as somebody doing something completely innovative.
Yeah, look, for us, I think we've seen in a short amount of time kind of 3 phases of the Brazilian ecosystem. I think we started with a lot of Me Too e-commerce kind of companies, the Groupon clones, e-commerce in the first phase, and that was kind of up until 2012, 2013. Then we've more recently, and what some of the things that we've invested in is not necessarily highly technical innovation, but what we call business process innovation. So essentially taking business processes that are broken, very manual, et cetera, applying technology in a large fragmented market. And that's what we've seen a lot of and done a lot of investing in recently. But now in Brazil, I think we're actually getting to the point where we're seeing also some very interesting, innovative technologies coming out of Brazil that we believe can be taken on a global platform eventually. So I think we're seeing that now. Again, it's an evolution of an ecosystem. It takes time to get there, but I think we're getting there, and we've got great technologists in Brazil. So we are seeing that, and we're very excited about that.
Great. Well, thank you, guys. Please, a round of applause for our panelists. Hopefully, we've convinced you to do more global investing, or at least co-invest with them. So thank you.
Thank you, Jackie.
Thanks.